Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you all for tuning in. I figured that we would do a little hangout and catch up while I will be out this weekend for the event. And just give me 1 second here. Hello. Okay. Well, now that that's out of the way, I think that we can just get started and catch up with everybody as we're all tuning in. I've done my face elsewhere. Might as well do it here on the channel, right? So, um, it is 7 o'clock. It is a surprise stream, Steve. In part because I am going to be out this weekend. This weekend is the weekend, the event in Nashville, and in fact, my travels will start with a fellow speaker tomorrow afternoon. So I thought that we would just do a little hang up and a hangout and AMA of sorts, and maybe catch up on some news. But I figured that I also had some thoughts on my mind that I wanted to share and sort of bounce them off of all of you and see what you think, because I thought that that might be better than just either doing another real talk, but the fact that I can just bounce it off with all of you, I think would be a much better time. But the comments, yes, I know. Despite my profile picture, despite the frog of the week, I am a real human being. Sorry to tell you that. And yes, the candle does burn in the back of the room. But don't worry, the stream will be here if you have to go somewhere or something like that. But yeah. So uh where to start? Everyone is very surprised that I'm not a frog. Well, I don't know what to tell you there. So I guess we'll start off with some questions here, and let's see. First one being about, did Sleepy Joe make Mr. Putler blink? And I don't think so, because all of a sudden there was a report I was reading from Politico that said analysts were saying that it could be on the 20th. So, or after the 20th, presumably, I think when the Olympics are over, which I think is this weekend. So, I mean, that's potential. A lot of people were making that comparison that there would be something after the Olympics or during it, in part because they don't want to embarrass the Chinese for doing something while it's being hosted in their country, especially after their relationship has been so good. And then secondly, after the Sochi Olympics in 2014, they also had taken action as well. So that's something to consider. I don't see it happening. I don't think that they want to occupy a country of 44 million people whose foreign debt to GDP ratio is like 80 some odd percent. I don't think they have the capacity to actually occupy a country. I think that really what you would want to achieve is striving for some kind of concession and maintain your territorial hold over the Donetsk, Donbass, and primarily Sevastopol and the Crimean Peninsula. It's already your highest concentration of, ethnic Russians in the area, and ethnic diplomacy has been a big part. So who knows, right? It's almost an any day now, but again, considering the security dilemma is still at an all-time high, the German government, I know German Chancellor Olaf Scholz had made a statement earlier saying that they haven't been able to confirm various aspects of troop placement or troop withdrawal. So in the meantime, the Russian Foreign Ministry, Maria Zakharova, I believe, is still their spokesperson, is talking about how they can just troll. I know that the Russian embassy had tweeted out the Pulp Fiction gif where he's just looking around. So all sorts of fun stuff. But that's one aspect of what's been going on in the news lately. I mean, it's been going on in the news for weeks, but yeah. But let's see. Zachary asks me, do I have a pet frog? And the answer is no. Much to the dismay, I'm sure, to other people, but no, I don't have one. Clossington has one, and her name is Bubbles, and she's actually a very cute frog, according to Clossington in the pictures that she sends. So am I saying 2 more weeks? I guess you could say it's like, what's the word I'm looking for? Almost as if it's like Groundhog's Day, 6 more weeks until Russian invasion. I really couldn't know. But I mean, the Russian state, I mean, like the Duma has been talking about having the Donetsk and Donbass regions as independent states and regions. I don't know if that's just the hardliners talking or that's a very political aspect. I'm not too sure. But it's definitely been something to say that, most of their fighting ground forces are still on, in Eastern Europe. So it's not to say that this isn't a serious situation. I mean, it is very serious, considering the security dilemma, the really incoherent aspects of diplomatic communication, yeah, I find it severely concerning that we're not taking this as diplomatically seriously while they're poking the nuclear armed bear, so to speak. Um, no one asks me, did I have a faux hawk back in the day? No, I used to have very long curly hair up until high school, and then I just started doing high and tight stuff, and that's sort of how it's been. But yeah, no. Uh, Liberty et Lesueur asks, do you agree that Europe needs to turn away from the US and its negative cultural exports and instead focus on new relationships such as Russia for a better future? I've been a big advocate for European defense autonomy. I think that that's sort of necessary. I do find that some aspects of NATO are vestigial, in part because it's such a large, encompassing organization now. What you've been seeing between a lot of the major European players is engage in bilateral defense agreements, so they're not necessarily doing they're not like doing one thing to antagonize a NATO ally, despite the fact that that's exactly what they're doing. Like you can see this with the French-Greek deal for, I believe it's updating their navy and buying some Rafale fighter craft. Not to mention that the Turks have been buying like German naval equipment, so you're seeing a very European affair all play out. So I agree with it, and I mean I think that if you were to sort of withdraw some of the cultural aspects away, that you would definitely see something happen there for Europe to start engaging more diplomatically in the continent. But that's something to keep in mind. I'm now reading the chat, and everyone's reactions has been very funny. Well, Timothy, this is it. This is what you're getting, right? And you'll see more of it at the event. I swear, much much better off in the suit, I'm sure. But let's see here. Blackwater Park saying, zero defense autonomy remotely plausible? They'd have to spend so much more to become players, I'd think. Well, I think this is why there's been a lot of conversation about, say, the European Union army. I don't necessarily think that that's going to be something that I would advocate for, but I mean, structurally and institutionally, it would probably be valid. But that doesn't stop, right, other larger European state players, France in particular, advocating for a more robust and international foreign policy. I know Macron has been advocating for it, and he's been pushing for a more, higher presence in Africa. So it probably wouldn't be plausible. I think it's plausible. I just don't think that you're going to have it very robust or feasible in the coming year. So it would take time, I think. But I would argue to a degree that it'd probably be good. Let's see here. TR Hudson. If you're not following TR Hudson on Twitter, please do. He's recently wrote a book that I'm probably going to read on my drive over. Do you think that the U.S. is holding its allies back in general? Probably. I mean, it's sort of an open-ended question, but I mean, if you were to say that grand strategy wants to have broad coalitions so that singular state or coalition state actors can't challenge you, then that would probably be by nature a way to hold them back. But at the same time, the answer would also be yes in terms of like energy policy with what we're seeing in the Russia-Ukraine situation with the US, because Germany's sort of paying the price energy-wise. So you could argue yes. But at the same time, there's also the response to that would be like, well, there's buck passing, so it's not necessarily like they're holding them back. It's more of like perhaps meeting a contractual, transactional aspect, considering how it works. But all sorts of stuff to go on. Let's see. So atrophied at this point take a long time for them to organize. Well, probably, which is why a lot of the stuff that's been talked about has been mainly like white papers or conversations. Like I said, it would take a lot of time for it to actually be a thing. So yeah, it would take years. But at the same time, I think if the Americans were to support European defense autonomy or something like that, then it would take time for them to pull out to begin with, or it would be transitional. I mean, it's a policy thing, right? And that's how I view it. It's just that it would take time. But again, I'll be sort of talking about that subject this weekend. My whole speech topic is the foreign policy of the next regime. It's just a 45-minute sort of conversation talking about how we got to here, what the policy is, how this relates to governance at home, and all that sort of stuff. Pete Budapest, with probably one of the funnier names if we're making fun of a certain politician. On balance, doesn't Putin hold more sway than the West over Ukraine anyway? Gas lines, naval power, proxy groups, etc. Yes, or at least in eastern Ukraine between Russian separatist groups that have been funded versus what pipelines are still open and existing, and the fact that most of the Navy is now conducting exercises in the Black Sea over the Crimean Peninsula definitely says something. But good Lord, I've been talking about Ukraine for weeks now. But thank you so much, Pete, for the super chat. Like I've told everyone in the past, I don't really keep any of this money. So this all goes to pills or medical bills, which I'm very appreciative of. Let's take a look at all of the wonderful other questions. So many Russian Ukraine questions, but that's okay. Ben Costa asking, do you think it's plausible that the EU can reformat itself to keep member countries within the near future? Like, do you mean to prevent sort of Brexit-like situations or Eurosceptic political movements? I really do think that they have already succeeded in that lens, considering how costly and how long it took Brexit to take place. I would argue that that was just the best example they could have done. They took the UK in negotiations, the French especially, right, to the woodshed, and they kind of allowed them to use Brexit as the cautionary tale. And it's kind of depressing when a sovereign country can make a decision democratically, and all of a sudden you see like Guy Verhofstadt and other EU leaders at the time literally going to party conferences. I know that they went to, I think Verhofstadt went to the Lib Dem conference before the 19 election, and lo and behold, right, that would be the definition of foreign election interference, but here we are. Is it plausible? Probably, but at the same time, I think that they've already sort of done what they can to show Eurosceptic political movements, nationalist sentiments, what it would look like, what the consequences are. Let's take a look here. Why do you think Ethiopia is choosing not to slowly fill the Renaissance Dam as to avoid tension? Well, Timothy, they're also sort of fighting a ethnic sectarian-esque conflict. So when the current, I believe he's Prime Minister Ahmed, had taken power, he sort of reformatted the political system. They didn't want ethnic-based political parties. He had set up this really grand big tent coalition, which allowed him to win re-election kind of handedly. And of course, the Tigrays had sort of began fighting. This conflict has been going on since he took office, which I think was in 2018. And that's been still happening. There's a great Twitter account, I think it's like Ethiopia Map, and it's been like doing live updates with a Google map, telling you where the conflict is, which forces have control, who's aligned with the government, who isn't, what's the government doing. And at the same time, they've also been using, I think, Turkish purchased drones, the same ones that the Ukrainians are using. So the dam is sort of a secondary issue when you're trying to maintain internal political and territorial sovereignty, not to mention the situation in Sudan, their neighboring country, who's also a concerned partner over the dam. They recently had a coup, and I think the military had pretty much just reinstated some things and changed the constitution. This is a subject, again, that we're probably going to have to revisit. I know we've done 2 streams now on the dam, but like I've mentioned, I think in recent conversation about like what I want to do for 2022, I do want to continuously update subjects that we have talked about. That way we can get sort of a timeline of briefings, so we can like do our homework from the past streams, update ourselves in the current one, and then talk about those sorts of things in the future. But no, it's a good question. It's partially diplomatic, but at the same time, you've got a very unstable Sudan. You also have an internal conflict. And last I checked, the Egyptians are still looking for a major power to play on their side. But all these wonderful, fun questions. Let's see. Juge asks, how do you feel about that new text will influence the future of geopolitics? U.S. maintains supremacy on railguns on ships, for instance, and the other thing would be the use of drones. So this is where I'm going to refer back to Morgoth's really good video, The Elephant and the Whale. I do think that tech is going to play a major role in how global governance operates, U.S. policy operates. The weapon tech thing, a lot of people who talk about international events say, well, oh, don't get sucked into the sort of feedback loop of arms race or arms technology development. I think that you should pay attention to it because as it does currently exist, I do think that the fact that we are now talking about hypersonic weaponry is very concerning because early warning detection systems have issues determining the difference between that and hypersonic weaponry. You have issues with how quickly that technology can be developed here at home, and the fact that our traditional programs for strategic missile intercepting, like the THAAD program and whatnot, they're not made for that. So those things definitely do matter. Drones, I still think will be used. Turkey's been very adamant about doing that and producing them with Ukraine, producing it with Ethiopia. We'll see it as the future of warfare. I think electronic stuff will definitely happen. So all sorts of stuff will play a major role. The question becomes, how disruptible is that technology? And I'm not a cyber security guy, but my gut would tell me to pay attention to that in the future, because if you can successfully disable the physical infrastructure, through electronic warfare, then it might not make all those fancy new toys work. So perhaps it may be, back to Friedman's prediction, where it's just more emphasis on smaller, tight-knit military units than perhaps this large array of tech or whatnot. So who knows? It might be a hybrid of both. This would be somewhere where I would bring on more mil-tech experts to answer that question. But let's see, going through the chat now. Saleh asks, I know it's insignificant, but can you comment on the Algerian-Moroccan conflict? Well, Sayla, when I get back from the event this Sunday, I will do my research and I will learn more about it. That way I can give you a more informed take. So that would be my answer. Do you think Russia integration into the EU is plausible or even desirable? Plausible, no. Desirable, no. That would be my straight answer. I don't think that the Russians would like to engage in an entity that is just as sort of imperial monetarily in its own right, while at the same time also has its issues, because who wants to be ruled by Brussels? And at the same time, that means you would have to obey laws that are part of, like, for instance, right, like with Turkey integration that they want to do, it's always about human rights. Human rights are various laws to protect certain groups, sort of this Civil Rights Act type legislation that now the EU sort of champions. And it's not like, is one of the complaints that was made in Brexit that kind of was fact checked to be true, was about how many laws that your government makes compared to what Brussels makes. And if you're being governed by bureaucrats and policy that gets voted like that, it becomes an issue. I don't see it being desirable. I think that the current situation, the way that Russia views itself, whether you want to call it a civilizational state, belligerent, or imperial, I don't see being desirable nor plausible in the future. However, can you get better relations and rapprochement, at least between, say, European states and Russia? That's definitely plausible. We're kind of already seeing that in the place. I think Germany will definitely in the future have a much stronger relationship with Russia. Mr. Populist asks if Hungary is the most based state in Europe. Well, Viktor Orban is hosting CPAC this year in his country, so the answer to that's probably no. Let's take a look here. Let's go through the chat now and see what I've missed here. But I feel like I've missed all sorts of things with the chat. Again, here we go. Pete Budapest sent another super chat. Thank you guys so much. Chances the US/West goes into recession in the next 12 months seems to be some lagging indicators. I've talked to a few people about it. I know Oros has been a market guy. Apex seems to have some idea that there's something definitely looming on the horizon. So I would bet good money that there is. I don't know. I have some cash in like gold and silver, so I'm not really a crypto guy. I'm more of an assets person. Dude guy asked, I missed the analog horror discussion. No, that will premiere on Saturday. So actually, after the stream is over, I'll probably walk the dog, take medication, and then I will edit out all of the fishing footage I took so I can put that all together, know how long my little speech/rant on that subject will be. So no, that is planned to premiere Saturday. So while I'm at the event, all of you lovely people who aren't in attendance will at least get some fishing and my thoughts on analog horror, because that's been my main form of like entertainment. I'm not a big movie or TV guy anymore because most of my time is spent listening to whatever everyone else is making. So that's what I've been very busy on. But it has not passed yet, so don't worry. Hunger. Oh boy. Which American young adult series is the most based or cringe series you've ever read? Twilight, Harry Potter, etc. Growing up, I distinctly remember reading 2. So I know that there was the Pendragon series and then Harry Potter. Those I remember reading as a kid, and not much else. Unless you were, unless it was me occasionally perusing through like that Larry B. Jenkins Left Behind series, which I guess you could say is the most based of them all because it's very eschatological. But I don't think that qualifies as young adult. I remember reading or watching a stream with like Settler's Lament and The Distributist and a few others who were talking about like reactionary themes in young adult fiction. And they're talking about Harry Potter and like there's a reason why we read these old books, these ancient texts, and why those are important. So, but I don't think any of them you can really align a political thing to. I mean, they probably do have political themes. And I mean, if you reread through like the actual Harry Potter books, which I haven't done, but we might just do for fun one of these days, right? It's not like the overt political wokeness is what it was back then, considering when these books were written. And now everything's just made gay, and now she's a TERF apparently. Let's see. No, I am not Mr. Darkness. I am in a room. But that's what's currently there. What did I miss? Let's see. Oh, somebody chats. Let's see. What do you think of the possibility breakup, Fed falling, unreliable? When do we need to fend against or defend for? Well, this goes back to like the ongoing conversation on like the national divorce discourse, right? I for one find it. There's a desire to, right? Like we talked about this yesterday on Oran's stream about like the political theology when we consider ourselves to be in a state of enmity where we feel like we're attacked. And it goes back to that conversation about political differences, because like this is why big tent politics is always an issue, right? Like, it's like the Brandy Love thing from a couple months back, where it was just like, like she might be a porn star, but she's R-based porn star, and then she'll go on this rant when the social conservatives rally against her, and she's just talking about like, oh wow, what a TPUSA, this thing for organized religion, which is like the least true statement on earth. And again, it's why I think political coalitions won't matter. That's why you kind of find your tribe, you find your people, you find people that you agree with. Why I advocate for localism to begin with, because things will probably get worse. I don't think that they're going to get so bad where territorial sovereignty will ever be an issue. It's the same reason why nuclear armed states haven't invaded each other like India and Pakistan, despite their Kashmiri clashes. I would expect unreliability in some areas, and this is where I think now, if you have family or you have kids, that you sort of push them in the direction towards actual professions that will mean something, like medical, automotive repair, etc. But as for, I mean, we're going to maintain the guise and illusion of things, I think, for some time, which is why Tyler, I've been I think since the channel began, I've always been an advocate for a lot more local focus, for sure. But again, thank you for the super chat. As always, I don't really keep this. This all goes towards the the medical expenses. Timothy Lovell. I have not seen the Thoreau documentary. I actually kind of want to. I might download it just to watch it when when it's not my turn to drive, just to see what it's like. As for my opinion, I think that he has an optics issue, but he's a good orator. I think that he knows how to talk to people. I've seen clips of him where he hosts the America First Packer, the AF Packer, whatever you want to call it. He's not a bad speaker. And I think that what he was doing strategically a few years back about like the groyping thing with like Charlie Kirk, that worked to a great extent, because now Charlie Kirk is talking about immigration, demographics, anarcho-tyranny. He's using words he would have like banned people or disavowed from on Twitter like 3 or 4 years ago. So I'm inclined to say that he serves a purpose. I just don't. I think that he also has like a rallying problem. I think it's cool that he's probably has people like Representative Paul Gossard sort of supporting him and talking to him about that. I just find it difficult, I think, for him to get a following that isn't just sort of that 15 to 23 age bracket. But if he's got that and he's organizing, and I'm glad that he's got a pack and everything, what this tells me is that he's at least resilient, even though I think that you can probably do better than making cookie jokes, if you know what I mean, on your streams, or having just a really upset view of women when he does this and then goes on a rant or something. I think that resilient, yes, but the overall problem is that you're talking to a digitally deracinated audience. But the other side of the coin is that he can at least have things happen in real life. I just think that there's some optics issues. But I've read people from everyone from Frody to Morgoth to even AA saying that, like, hey, the Thoreau doc actually puts him in a good light, despite it meant to be a hit piece. So good on him. But no, I haven't seen it yet, but I do plan to. Let's take a look at other questions. Do you think Germany will call off Nord Stream 2? There was a couple of people asking about that. I don't think so. I'm not planning on it. I don't think they'll plan on it, but yeah, no. It just depends, I suppose, really on what happens here. I don't think the pipeline will still be a contentious issue, because I don't think the United States wants a very strong relationship between Germany and Russia. It's been that way since the 90s, but I don't think that it'll be called off. I think that once the situation is, eased off diplomatically, potentially that the Nord Stream 2 pipeline could be used as some sort of alm to give to the Russians to improve relations. So who knows? Juge asks, will the event be recorded, published, or streamed? There will be an event book that you can purchase that'll have everyone's speeches written. I know that when AA and them did their event, they this was, I think, around February of last year. And I know that Panama had just put out his actual speech, The Authentic Reactionary. So I do think that it'll eventually come out. I don't know what the time frame will be, but it will eventually be released. I just don't know when. So let's see. Yeah, the Left Behind series is pretty heretical, but I mean, I read it when I was like a teenager, and my understanding of like eschatological matters was just very naive and whatnot. So yeah, why Peter Jackson is inherently right wing, part 19. I don't want to. There are people that do content from like the right a lot better than I ever can. This year, we're going to try doing movie reviews, and my patrons have been very kind to slog through some of those films with me. We went over the movie Her, the one starring Joaquin Phoenix and Scarlett Johansson. That's like a 2.5-hour film. And then we stayed for like another 2 hours talking about just some of the horrors of that movie, viewing it in like a 2021 lens compared to 2013. So, but we're going to try. So I wanted to break that down into maybe 3 or 4 parts, because I think there are different themes I want to touch on. And then the other one's just going to be about the 1941 film Sergeant York. So that'll be things. There's lots of stuff I want to do, but I don't want to be the person that does like a 20-part series on a film or something. I feel like there are much better people that do that. Argent does it. Morgoth and Endeavor do great classic movie reviews. So I don't want to step on everyone else's toes. Let's see. Okay. This is an interesting question. Everybody loves Cthulhu. I love this name. This is great. That would make a very good Substack or YouTube channel name. I don't know if you actually make content, but you shouldn't let that name go to waste. What's your take on the Washington consensus versus the Beijing consensus? I still feel it's valid for my IR class days, but that precludes any infiltration in either capital, or is that naive? So it's not to say that there aren't two different classes of consensus between, say, Washington and Beijing. The U.S. is still operating on that strategy of primacy. A lot of people know that. And I talked about this when I was with Imperium Cast a while back, was saying that the current strategy that the U.S. operates as it tries to react against Chinese, rise and their own interests, is rather self-defeating, because you're wanting to stop China. You want to stop IP theft. You want to talk about trade, and even the Biden administration is talking about trade and continuing some of the things that the Trump administration did. And yet they're not really doing anything about espionage in the university system, where universities can just basically beg Congress and the government not to do anything. And those are things to definitely keep in mind. But at the same time, right, would be the Beijing consensus. They're also a part of like the COP26 agreement. They're on board with this WEF stuff, But I noticed that, instead of saying like, oh, we're going to pursue renewables, which they clearly have, I'm not saying that they don't, but they're also willing to invest like hundreds of billions of dollars in nuclear energy. They're willing to just go total productivity, own nothing, be surveilled, be happy and rent, with smart cities and things like that. And I think they've been practicing with that to some extent. There are two differing visions, albeit similar. But I think it goes back to that, the $64,000 question. Are you a revisionist or are you a status quo state? And the more I sort of look at things, it seems to be a status quo state to use existing global institutions and infrastructure to sort of poise yourself as the model that others want to build themselves on. And I think that there's a very compelling case for that. Yes, Chronicles of Narnia and Lord of the Rings are innately better, especially Chronicles of Narnia. I have a very soft spot for C.S. Lewis. Is that a triangle? Well, it's actually a wooden. No, it's a wooden Christmas tree and things like that. So no, I am not Masonic in any way. I've never actually stepped foot in a Masonic charter or chapter or anything like that. There are other questions. Okay. Isn't it grand how Trudeau can ask for war powers and freeze your bank account if you give $25 to some chud in a truck, yet does nothing when churches are being burned down en masse? Well, Gentle Darkness, Oren and I talked about that yesterday, about sort of that. But I mean, it's state sanctioned, right? And I think this is the really good thing to sort of differentiate here is that when these things happen and there's no real prosecution, then you know that it's state sanctioned. The same thing with like the give, send, go list being apparently hacked by some disgusting, mentally ill Twitch streamer and other people sharing it on Twitter. That it's state sanctioned, and that's something that we're gonna have to live with. And is it grand? I know that you're being sarcastic, but I mean, my like really disturbing white pill or silver lining is that at least this power is being formalized. Like we can identify it and name it, which I think is sort of a good thing if we want to start seriously talking about how to change things. But yeah, it does make me upset that it relies now on community policing and parishes and congregations having to defend their own houses of worship, and the government does nothing. So it tells you that you're dealing with a very anti-Christian government, and unfortunately, war is the health of the state, and the state is at war with you. GB says he's thinking about becoming a diesel mechanic. Please do so. Study that stuff. We need to. I love the Wojak meme where it's like, all right, guys, we've secured our like 50 acres of land. What are we gonna do? What has everyone brought to the table? And everyone's like, well, I brought my Evola books. And not to say that you shouldn't read Julius Evola. There's some parts that you should. I think Metaphysics of War and Ride the Tiger are very good, but you should have actual skills. Bolero sends a super chat, $4.99. Thank you so much. Should we advocate that all troublesome? Okay, a little spicy. Well, I wouldn't mind loving to have certain people muted on Twitter with their Twitter account suspended for 30 days. Ash Sarkar and such, but it's a little spicy there. I will publicly disavow, but I think that we should put more emphasis on people who are, 12th generation immigrants, than rather new people. Welding is definitely something to consider, Mr. Chieftain. Yes. Let's see here. Oh, he's asking about the documentary. So I think Louis Theroux or whatever his name is did a documentary recently for HBO. I don't remember. He did a documentary on Nick Fuentes and trying to make him look bad. And apparently from the clips that I've seen, it actually makes him look really based. So who knows? But yeah, let's take a look here. Oh, C there. Okay. I don't know what you mean by C as a verb there, Bolero, but thank you for the $1.99. Let's take a look. Oh, well, thank you. He says, I'm very excited for the analog horror talk because I've been getting it into as late. Are you familiar with the Mandela Catalog? I'm actually going to be talking about almost exclusively the Mandela Catalog when I do the Real Talk recording tonight, because it's just... I've been following real analog horror since it was just offshoots of emergency broadcast alert scenarios, EAS scenarios. I talked about this in the Halloween video I did. I'm a sucker for those. I loved Local 58. Gemini Home Entertainment is still going on, which is really good. And then Kane Pixels, out of nowhere, has made like the Backrooms copy pasta story deal very real. And I find out that this kid's like 16 and he's using Blender to make the stuff look like it's real life. And there's like a backstory that he's adding to it and fleshing it out. It's very good. There's the Twitter account, The Sun Vanished, which I've also really been enjoying. This is my entertainment. This is what I'll soy face over. But the Mandela catalog literally opens up with like the most like perverse, scary, uncanny valley, distorted voice, religious thing over like a children's nativity cartoon. So we'll definitely be talking about all of that. So you'll all enjoy that Saturday. It's unscripted as always with Real Talks, but you'll hear me go off on these two different main avenues, one being religious and the other sort of a generational age thing. So yeah, don't worry. Okay, Bolero, I figured that's what you meant by so, but again, I'm not gonna be reading out things that are a little spicy, but I mean, it would be nice to put more emphasis on those that are already here than those who are incoming. All right, let's see here. I'm in super chat timeout until I can spell. Well, you've given more than enough, Bolero, no worries. Trado 2015 says the problem with Fuentes is that his following is literally self-described cult, and many of his followers are extreme fanatics. Yeah, this is the what I mentioned earlier about the issue over the 23 to 15 crowd. I find it a little worrisome that you can get that kind of crowd, and then people that were born in like 2004, 2005, 06 or whatever will follow you, and those guys haven't even gone to college yet, and they're concerned about these things. But at the same time, I relate to it, and I can understand it because nothing I think would make me want to lash out and try to be attracted to some kind of figure like that, waking up and kind of realizing I was born too late to really make any meaningful change, and now all I have to do is be in this position to advocate and go on the offensive. So no, I really do kind of understand, like, the fanaticism is a problem, I think, in my opinion. Like, when I first started making videos, I would get occasional like quips from Groiper related accounts saying, well, you don't get it, man. And it's just like, okay, go eat your crusts. But at the same time, I can definitely understand and empathize, but I do lament for it. And we're eating out of or drinking out of our Frog of the Week mug. You can see that in the merch link below. Our favorite Brazilian is in the chat, Juge. He is the gentleman that has made this in my new profile picture. So you can find him on Twitter at Dora the Stormer. Go follow his work. He makes great stuff. Let's take a look and catch up with chat here. TR Hudson, super chat not working at the moment. Sorry, bro. Don't worry about it, Mr. Hudson. Wanted to hear your thoughts on the Three Gorges Dam. I think it goes in my lifetime. I think there's a strong possibility that it goes in our lifetime. It's been talked about for like decade, like at least a decade, or almost since it's been made, talking about it. So, I mean, it happens. I wouldn't be surprised if it does. It's not like Chinese infrastructure is really made to last. And you can find almost any compilation of clips of things falling apart or things kind of just barely working. So who knows? But I'm more inclined to think that it's definitely going to go. Clossington would definitely be the guy to ask that question, Mr. Hudson. I would go that way because he would know more than me because he's actually a civil engineer. But for the sake of being exciting, that I think that potentially it will, considering the structural issues that have been addressed. How do I see the truck protests playing out? Well, considering that the Emergency Powers Act has been invoked and that, they're already giving orders, they're already shutting down bank accounts, they want to go after crypto, they've already started leaking, people who donated to Give, Send, Go, that it's very telling that we're going to see sort of the same thing that we saw happening here in the States after January. And they'll start cutting down and they'll start... they'll probably push back. There were some places on some bridges where it's already been dispersed. Some clips of them hugging the cops saying, like, we don't have any more choices. They have to. This is their livelihoods. They even had stores and store owners that would donate like $150 saying, oh, I didn't know enough. And now my shop is being targeted by radicals and I've got to shut up business and not do anything for a few weeks. And to me, that's it's a chilling effect, and that's where we're at, and it's absolutely depressing. So I don't, given the response by the state, and now they're not listening to them, and all the various premiers in the provinces and other parts of Europe now are sort of beginning to ease off on restrictions. I mean, even the Israelis are having their own trucker convoy protest. So, unless the goal is to sort of change the regime that implemented this in a velvet, nonviolent way, then inevitably you are still playing by the rules of those that own you and you're subservient to. So I do worry that it will be all for naught, and hundreds, if not thousands, of hardworking, good people are going to be targeted. And I've watched already, I tweeted this out last night, about pastors being arrested by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, and that's where we're at, which is always depressing. Glow in the Dark asking a question: what is the objectively best cut of steak? That's a good question. I'm a sucker for sirloin, but I mean, T-bone is very good. New York strip isn't bad. I don't think I can give you a best answer because I've had very good steaks of all different kinds of cuts. But I think I'm going to have to go with sirloin. That'll be my answer. Sirloin steak. There you go. If that's that's my that'll be my take for objectively the best cut. Thoughts on other geopolitics channels like the Duran. I quite enjoy the Duran quite a lot. I also enjoy the work that's being done over at Geopolitics and Empire because their main host is incredibly well read and has lived in other parts of the country. Is an incredibly well-traveled gentleman whose name I cannot pronounce to save my life, so I'm not going to say it, but go check out Geopolitics and Empire. I like the Duran. What If Alt History does really great work, even if he's not like an explicitly geopolitical channel. His reading list that he like puts out on his community tab is like goals for me, because I would like to like read that many books in a year, and it's over 20. It's like 30 some odd books in a year, which is really good considering what he's talked about, what his influences are. So yeah, I follow a lot of these people and I learn a lot from them, and I like listening to their takes. So they inform me as much as the journals I catch up on, whether I, taking advantage of the 100 free articles a month on JSTOR, the newest books. I still read Foreign Affairs magazine. I don't have a subscription, but I buy it any chance that I get. So yeah, those channels are good, and it's always good to have differing viewpoints and perspectives. Like in the same way I'll listen to Russians with Attitude when they talk about the situation from how they view it. So yeah, it's always good to have. Yeah, Charlie Chieftain, I had mentioned this earlier. You shouldn't ignore military procurement. You shouldn't ignore military technology. Like, I know the F-35 program has been a big aspect of diplomacy as well, considering, for instance, like Turkey's no longer receiving them. So yeah, you can't ignore that. I wholeheartedly agree. And I've talked about it too, like with Turkey also buying the S-400 missile series from Russia, despite the fact that they've been antagonistic. Let's see. Mr. Mandrill for $4.99. Thank you so much, sir. I have always maintained that national divorce is the next step after assuming local or regional control, the least violent option in my table, in my view. I know you and I have talked about it privately. The issue that I find is that it's the same thing I think the Distributus is also on about with this sort of discussion is that you have to be in a position of strength to get a hold of it. And you just need that position of strength. And I don't know if you can locally seize it and then go for it nationally, especially with how the regime has sort of maintained who the enemy is and what's to do. Could it be least violent? Yes, but this requires, but the same answer would be, how do you leave somebody that wants to kill you, right? Like, how do you leave an abusive husband, or how do you leave an abusive relationship or something like that? Especially if they do want you dead, it's not something that you can just amicably leave from. I think that would require some aspects of violence. So I don't think that it can be like a velvet change. Vingel asks, you may want to consider doing an analog horror stream with Tyler Hamilton. As you probably know, he's not only a big-brained philosophy theologian guy, but he's also a massive horror buff. I didn't know that he was a massive horror buff. The first time I've actually heard of Tyler Hamilton was he was on break the rules, talking about Gnosticism and Christianity. I know that he's a really big Catholic theologian guy, and I was like really impressed with his knowledge and how well he could argue. Which I was just like, oh, bravo, I'm going to follow this guy. So I didn't know that he's a horror dude. So I'm going to have to go follow him then for horror takes and things like that. I'll have to find what he's talked about. But yeah, no, I would love to do I'll do the real talk about it. But yeah, I would love to revisit the subject of analog horror in the future, because people liked the Ben-Hur Part 1 stream, which I need to schedule and do. I just have to figure out when Geo is available, and then also figure out Marcus Furious's schedule, because he's in Australia. So yeah, all sorts of stuff. But no, I'll definitely look into his horror takes. Day of the Jackal is also a good film. I'm gonna have to go look that up. TR Hudson for $10 US. Thank you so much. Got it working. Here's a few bucks for meds, friend. Well, thank you. And like I said earlier, Mr. Hudson has wrote a wonderful book that I've purchased. I've started actually reading the first few pages. I do plan to finish it over the drive, called Automaton. Go buy it. Go read it. And it will be good. I do intend to have Mr. Hudson on for an episode of Prudent Reads to talk about his wonderful piece of fiction. Which again, we need more artists. This is why I like what Columba's doing. I like that Farrow talks about art. I like that Hudson has written a book. The Passage Prize is a very good sign. There needs to be an aesthetic besides just theory or activism or localism. The art is something that the right used to have, and we're watching this slop on TV, and I'm not a fan. I can never unsee her. I don't think anyone's called it that yet, but there you go. There you go. This is as good as it gets, unfortunately. Yes, Chronicles. Well, they're both very good. I love Tolkien and C.S. Lewis for their own respective reasons. I do think some of the best work that Lewis has actually written was like Abolition of Man, the Screw Tape Letters, and That Hideous Strength. Those are very, very good. I don't know if you can really hold a candle to Chronicles of Narnia, to the epics that are The Lord of the Rings. I don't think that's a very fair comparison. Charlie Cheevan says, The Wandering Earth is an interesting film regarding the Chinese perspective on major issues. The Wandering Earth. We'll add that to the list. Are we talking about the... we're now talking about BreadTube. Yes. Well, there's a wonderful book that I intend to... I've read it already. I will do a Prudent Read stream on it, probably when I get back from the event, called BreadTube Serves Imperialism. And if you give me 1 second, I can actually pull it out for you. And here we go. Slowly. You don't see it, but there's like 20 books like next to me that you all can't see the pile of the ever-growing list of things I need to, go over, review, read. But here we go. So yeah, BreadTube Serves Imperialism by Caleb Maupin, who's like a very avowed, dyed-in-the-wool academic Fabian-style socialist. But he wrote this whole book saying that, like, yeah, did you just disrupt my CIA narrative, dude? And he pretty much goes through all of the BreadTubers and vouchers on that list. So that'll actually be a fun stream, because like you'll read like the first 15 pages, because I didn't know who Caleb Maupin was when I read the book. I just saw that someone was shitting on BreadTube, so I bought it impulsively. And then like I read the first 20 pages and I'm like, oh, this is some very lefty late stage capitalism crap. And then I was like, oh, Mr. Maupin like owns a think tank about advocating for socialism. So, but that should be fun to sort of see that old style Caitlin Johnstone-esque lefty progressive that doesn't like sort of imperialism. So that should be a fun read. Oh, a fun review stream. Show books in the gene. Yeah, by Caleb Maupin, Liam. So yeah. Do you anticipate China moving on Taiwan after the Olympics? I think that after the Olympics are finished, that sort of all of the diplomatic tensions will resume. That comparison's been made with Russia. I wouldn't be surprised, considering Russian forces are so far on Eastern Europe. There's not a lot of BTGs where on the Russian-Chinese border side of things. Plus, they've conducted joint naval exercises. They've signed agreements of friendship. I mean, potentially, it would be a very interesting way to sort of split the Western American attention. But yeah, I mean, potentially. I haven't been following closely enough on the Taiwan situation to see what their recent moves by the Chinese government are. So, more things to touch back on, especially after the Olympics. The reviews on BreadTube Serves Imperialism are a bunch of Vosh fans calling the books the deranged ramblings of a reactionary. But all it takes is 5 minutes to go through Malpin's Twitter timeline and know that he's a very dedicated old school socialist. So that doesn't surprise me. I'm sure he told his fans to go mog the Amazon reviews. So that doesn't surprise me. But while Vouch fans, the CIA bots and all of the state mandated Twitch, donators and whatnot, like, thank you, federal agent so and so, for the 500 bits or whatever. It really keeps me going. See, if I really wanted to make money, I would have just sold my conscience and my sense of well-being and identity, and I would have just become a leftist. But I like having principles, I guess. Steve points out something that I would actually love to do in the future. All the people into geopolitics need to get together and form a dissident foreign policy group. Well, I remember at the beginning of the year, I talked about having like a website or something where I could do more dedicated writing or like quarterly reports or something, which I intend to do after the event. I really want to be serious about writing more serious policy prescriptions. But no, I wholeheartly agree. I just don't. I don't want to put something together and just be like, hey, like I'm this middle little channel of like 5,000 people, and you guys have been doing this for years. Would you like to start something? But I do think that is something that happens, that should happen. I agree. I think you do need to start formalizing and doing institutions, even if people don't like you. I mean, even before Spencer became very prominent in the media during the 2015 timeframe of politics, I mean, he had his own research group and, his own public policy place. So I think that we'll need things like that. Let's see here. In what post-regime way, besides for military victory, do you think that the USA could gain respect again? Simple, competent governance. That's really what you would need, would be competent governance. We take a look at what's happening domestically, which of course there's done for a lot of political machinations, but if you were to start seriously curbing on opioid deaths, if you were to start seriously taking a look at things that are happening in Wall Street, if you were to start doing not like China, but maybe start actually prosecuting sitting members of Congress over their trades in the stock market and going after corruption, that would be a miles and above difference from where we are. The problem is that I don't think that you'll get either of those. But a post-regime way to have actual victory would be being healthy, being competent, being able to actually keep things up and running as things fall apart. This is why you need your Clossingtons. This is why you need your Charlemagnes and distributists, because these guys are software engineers, they're civil engineers. You need people that can actually do things with their hands. You need people that actually work for a living. Because if you don't have that, then what are you really accomplishing, right? And that would be the way that you do it, is if you can outlast something, then do it. Because, it's the one thing that I think Yarvin's been right about, and it's been 2 or 3 things that he's been really good on. The first one is that no empire lasts forever, but they always plan to. And then the second one has been that, God doesn't like it when you play pretend. So don't play pretend and actually like pick up meaningful skills to do it. And that's why the community aspect, localization, networking, and seriously investing in people really matters. Like I've talked about it, like you need to actually have some triage way for that to happen. But right now, our cultural products as well, and I think Glow in the Dark just mentioned this in chat, is just that we have tent cities that were talked about in Star Trek DS9, where it's like by the 2020s every city in America looked like this, as Ben Sisko walks around with oh, the medical doctor's name escapes me off the top of my tongue, but that's just like, yeah, I mean, that's where we're at. Or we used to make interesting cultural products, but again, I feel like that also gets sort of blinded by nostalgia for a time frame that we weren't born in. Because like everyone's just like, oh, wouldn't you love it if America was like a Norman Rockwell painting, and then you read some of the Norman Rockwell painting titles where it's like freedom from want, and I'm just like, oh, it's very FDR New Deal esque, and that's just as bad. It's kind of what got us to here partially. So you're just like, don't be blinded by the nostalgia. Don't be blinded by the cozy. It's good to make things, but it's at the same time we all know that art is a reflection of culture. Bashir, thank you, symbols. Those things matter, and I mean, you want that, and which is why I talked about what Glow in the Dark mentions. Like, if you have tent cities and such, you need to take care of that first, which is why I advocate for, if you have bare bones competence, that's going to be a very powerful alternative to what you're currently seeing. But as long as the media keeps telling you that your life is miserable, and that's a good thing, it's going to be really appealing when someone tells you that the grass is greener right next door. So, excuse me, there's some potential there. But that kind of brings me to what I had in mind to sort of just talk about. I almost wanted to do a speech on this or do it in a video, but I was recently listening. My music is like three things. So it's stuff that I've been listening to for like the last 10 years. It is either like chant and prayer. I have a whole playlist for it. It's really nice. And then it's whatever the algorithm shows me. And like a year ago, sea shanties were very popular, and of course, I'm a deep fan of the Canadian icon Stan Rogers, and of course, Barrett's Privateers is amazing. But he's written so many other great songs, and I think my favorite song by Stan Rogers is "The Idiot," which is talking about being a working man working in the refinery, and he's got that line in there about being on the government dole will rot your soul. And wanting to be free is what makes you an idiot. And I like that song because it not only is it talks about a class of people that we typically don't sing about. Like modern country music doesn't really pay too much attention to like actual oilmen or working class people or truckers, especially this sort of like pop stadium outside of Austin, Texas kind of country music, which I find absolutely frustrating. Because it's not like the country music of, Patsy Cline or Hank Williams or anyone like that, which is always depressing. But I love that song, "The Idiot," and it's been on my mind a lot because it's just like, I think that's a really firm determination of what separates the. I don't even want to say it's a left-right issue because there are plenty of people who are working class that do these things that have left-wing opinions, and I've met them. But this call and desire to be free, this call and desire to be not dependent, to not be on anything, and to be your own man. Like even in the song, he says that there's a steady check waiting for you, and it's not as pretty and idyllic as it might be, of course, in the eastern town, right? Because he's talking about Canada, but you can kind of see the same thing about rural life as well. You're not going to have your conveniences. You're not going to have these services that are really nice and decked out for you. I think that you can really compare it to that song today because it's just like, you're not going to have your restaurants or your Starbucks or your Uber Eats that are 5 minutes away, but there's something that is innately rewarding, I think, about all that sort of stuff. And yeah, it's idealistic in the sense because, it's not like it's an easy life. But I mean, even in that song, he's very adamant about it. Like, young guys, it's not paradise. It's not anything like that. But he at least talks about, that this is hard work. And there's always the aspect of things of when you do it yourself or that, you've created something or you work with your hands that offers a unique sense of perspective or a unique sense of connection to the world that I don't think that you get from being behind a desk. Like I work behind a desk and it's absolutely commiserating, right? Which always sucks. But then you see people that can that do something with their hands and you're just like, yeah, that's what you want to be. There's always that call to it, because I think once man separates himself from nature completely, then the real deracination begins. And if it makes me an idiot to be this like thin person with no real technical skills who wants to like be like that, then yeah, probably. But there's a calling to it, I think, that all men appreciate, and I think that really is what matters here. We kind of talked about it at the beginning, MND, some of the Ukraine stuff. If there's something that I've missed in the last hour, well, I don't have Twitter open or any other tabs or anything like that. I'm just chatting with you all and just thinking out loud. We were just talking about Stan Rogers and the Idiot, which is probably one of my all-time favorite songs. Yep, there you go. Like he says in the song. So come all you fine young fellows who've been beaten to the ground. This Western life's no paradise, but it's better than lying down. Which, yeah, I mean, at least he's definitely honest about that. But no, it's definitely true. Ryan, I wholeheartedly, it's better than lying down. I think that the dad from Coraline, where he's just like typing at the computer and his eyes got bags under them. He's got his little Michigan State sweater on. Like, how many people are like that, and myself included, to some extent? And that's partially why I enjoy the fishing videos that I do, the real talks, because you're at least grounded in a sense of nature, and you can enjoy the outdoors and walk around in the woods and appreciate it. Like the footage that you'll see on Saturday, right? The wind is blowing very quickly, and you can see the clouds and the changing of the color of the sky as the sun sets. And to me, that's the most beautiful aspect about it, not just the idyllic scene at the pond. It's just the very beautiful stuff that you see is very nice. And I think so many people don't appreciate that. Yeah, you can talk about how ugly some places in the states can be. I say that El Paso is sometimes like a very is like a woman when you're drunk, like she's very pretty at night, but in the daytime not so much. And there are places, like if you've ever been, then I'm sure you know about like Scenic Drive or things like that, where it's just a view over the top of the Franklin Mountains and things like that, and you can see the lights of, the University of downtown and all of the lights that come after it across the border with Ciudad Juarez. And it's very beautiful. The Franklin Mountains are very beautiful. Seeing it from the air, who's done it, it's just very, very nice. And I don't think people appreciate that enough. And I think as you get older, one tends to appreciate it. And I think that's what's so depressing about it, because it's a sign of maturity. And now so many people are like permanently infantilized online, where everyone's sort of dopamine hit is about the the like, the retweet, the Twitch streamer that says their name after donating like $400 or something. And it's certainly frustrating to see that be the case, where everyone's so disconnected from it. But at the same time, it's also a product of the times. We were in liturgy actually last Sunday, and the father, of course, it was the Sunday of the publican and the Pharisee, and the sermon is talking about the importance of the only person that we should compare ourselves to is the comparison to Christ. And of course, you compare the differences between the publican and the Pharisee, the guy who does everything. The Pharisee who does everything, he does all the right acts, and he thinks, how holy am I? And he looks at the publican, the tax collector who's hating. He's like, he can't even bring himself to say the prayers. He's just sitting at the door. But there, lo and behold, the tax collector, the publican, has his head looking at his chest, and he just says, Lord, forgive me, for I am a sinner. And he is the one who walks away with humility, who is holy. And I find that to be kind of relevant, because then he goes on talking about social media and the likes and whatnot. And one of the kids is talking, and the father goes, yeah, and in newspapers, if they're still around. And the kid goes, what are newspapers? And part of me couldn't have, the parish laughed, but a part of me was just like, it's the evolution of things, because kids nowadays are being raised with a screen in front of them in order to sort of placate them while they're being taken to Walmart or a grocery store or whatever. No real connection to the physical. That's why I hate it when I only have access to PDFs of books, or someone recommends an ebook to me, because it's just very frustrating, because I want a physical, something I can hold in my hand, something that I need right in front of me. I can't do the read on a phone stuff. At least Skeptical Waves at least keeps me engaged audioly, but not in that way. Let's see here. MD talked about troop deployments. I'll have to take a look at that afterwards because, like I said, I haven't really been catching up. I just have this one tab open, which is the StreamYards tab. Juge says, do weightlifting. I am not really possible, at least for in one arm right here. I've got, if you can't tell, this little, that right there. It's from, I have a fistula in my arm, so it's not something that I can just lift and do. I'm trying to figure out with all the transplant clinic people what on earth it is I need to do in order to bulk up, so to speak. But unfortunately, weightlifting, at least with one arm, is not really practical. Otherwise, you break the fistula, you start internally bleeding. Not good for you. It's not a good time. Trado makes an interesting point here where he says, I find it interesting that before the 1970s, fiction showed the future has an overall hopeful place with some mundane problems. Post-70s media depicts it as a hellhole. Yeah, and I think that's where you get a lot of conversations about retrofuturism, where, like, I think about the most perfect form about it is the issue for, what's the word I'm looking for? It's hopeful, like the Jetsons. That's the one I was looking for. It comes out in 1962. It depicts a world 100 years in the future, and it has all these modern conveniences and the most mundane problems that seem to be, age old. Things like marriage and raising kids and things like that, and even the adventure stuff out there, Lost in Space and all that. There's still this weird sort of hopefulness to it. And yeah, you're right. 70s and 80s, it really changes, and I think the digital and analog revolutions that come from it definitely change, and things like that is very clear to me that something definitely changed. Maybe I think it's that post Cuban Missile Crisis is maybe when the attitude really begins to shift, because it became very real of how likely it could happen. Then you have Chernobyl, 3 Mile Island, all those sort of accidents as well that may play a role into it. But I mean, at the same time goes on, and sort of that post-60s revolution leads to 1970s decadence. Like, if you really want, I think a really good music way to document, like, the decadence of the 1970s. When I say decadence, I say it in a mean way, not just like excess or whatnot, but like some of the depravity, some of the just the hopelessness of it all is Steely Dan, because there's a lot of debauchery. There's a lot of just these sort of like down and out songs, whether it's Dirty Work or Let's Go to the Movies, King Richard, which is not a so thinly laced song about Richard Nixon. It all talks a lot about that kind of aspect, and I think that there's a lot to talk about the 1970s as a decade genre wise. You said Manoa says, I've been listening to Charles Haywood in his book reviews. He's no fan of Yarvin. Well, Charles Haywood definitely is worth reading. He's got the Worthy House and all that. I like his articles. He did a really good one about January 6th of last month that was really good. But he's not a fan. Well, there are plenty of people on the right that aren't necessarily a fan, right? I think that the more I look back on reading some of the old UR stuff, I really enjoy how Dawkins got pwned, I think, more than I enjoy the open letter. I mean, the open letter is good because you get the cathedral concept, but I think the idea of talking about meme plexes and mind viruses is far more entertaining, and far more applicable, especially in the 2020s, where you had Q and you have the mind virus of diversity of strength, the environmental eschatology. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff there to talk about. Let's see here. Have I watched the Ashes of Civilization series? No, I have not, and this is the first time I've heard about it, so I'm going to have to go look it up. But Monothalmus, I know that you had tweeted at me ahead of time about questions, so let's go find out what on earth those questions were. So I can load them up now on my phone for DMs. That's why you can see the glow here. You're going through Peter Kemp because of Charles Haywood. Good little books. Time to go read and buy book from, what's the word I'm looking for? Go buy book from Mystery Grove Publishing, because he's got all the Peter Kemp stuff. Let's see here. So Monothalmos had sent me a DM because I know it's late over there. For the Euros that have made it an hour in, the reason why I've done, or yeah, it's the Academic Agent series. If that's what you mean, then yes, I've watched those, like the Detroit ones, the 1970. Yeah, no, I have seen those. I thought you were referring to something else. This is why you have to name the author. But no, so Monothalmos had asked a few questions, and I will read them out to all of you so I can give you some answers. A scattered series, yes, Glow in the Dark, they are scattered. So submission for questions in case the live chat doesn't come up with good ones. So here are all the questions that he asked that actually haven't been asked yet. So he says, what am I currently reading? That's question number one. So what I am currently reading is there are three things that I'm currently reading through right now that I've been on and off about when I can. The first one is Mr. Pollard's Southern History of the War. I have the 1976 Fairfax edition that I got from my late great uncle. So I've been reading through that. In the first chapter, his perspective as a Southerner about how the Union is not what it was from the federal Constitution in the 1780s, and talking about like the Northeastern perspective. Very spicy. But again, there will be other texts that I've been recommended to read alongside with him, but it's a very thick boy. So that's book number one. Book number two is that I'm trying to finish up very quickly on Bertrand de Juvenel's On Power. I started last year, and then some things got in the way. I caught COVID in December, and then work and all that jazz has got me in the way. So that's book number two. And then book number three, which is actually behind me next to my prayer book, is the Philokalia. I bought volume one, so it's really amazing to just read the thoughts of those who were inspired by the Desert Fathers and the early church fathers and their monasticism and asceticism, and just seeing some of the earliest writings of Christianity and of the old churches. I'm going to be doing a reading of this actually, and the patrons will get a taste of it next week and see what they think. But I found St. John Cassian writing about the 8 vices, which sounds very familiar to the 7 deadly sins, if you sort of know where that comes from. But I'm listening to him go through these things, and he's talking about dejection and avarice and anger, and it's just age-old advice that is really held up, and it's very moving to me. So listening to these guys who were born the 300s AD, dealing with some of the churches and moving out and praising and going into Egypt, into the desert to just pray. It's very powerful. So those are the three things that I am reading. Tyler Santinelli asks this question, and then I'll go back to some of Mono's questions. He asks, what would you show an open-minded progressive friend? The Distributist's intro into Moldbug. That's probably a very good place to start, and then go to Charlemagne, because after he gets the, Moldbugian intro from Dave, go to Charlemagne's channel and just say, like, if you would like to know more and in depth on what this viewpoint of neo-reaction, then that would be a good way to go about it. But I mean, if that all interests your open-minded friend, then maybe suggest De Maistre or suggest Schmidt or Donoso, some of the older writers. John Gordon asks about the trucker situation in Canada. Is this the end of Trudeau? Well, John, I talked about it earlier, but I do think the fact that a lot of parts are being disbanded, there's sort of this push to say that truckers have automatic weapons and things like that. It's certainly worrying that the security state is going to shut them down. I don't think that this is the end of Trudeau, at least in the short term. It may affect them in the long term, because even the new Democratic Party or whatever with Sin or whoever their party leader is, was talking about the issue over whether or not protests would be used on left-wingers. So who knows? But I don't think that this is the end until there's another election. But even then, who knows? But like I mentioned earlier, unless your goal is to really start changing things regime-wise, then you're not going to really engage with you're still going to live under their rules. So yeah, things to keep in mind. But I don't know. Record Deepin says, I wouldn't. What's wrong with the Nerd Culture series? That's a good one of Dave's. Actually, maybe not start with Moldbug's video or any of the old classic writers. I would actually do To Be Right Wing in 9 points. That would be something to keep in mind, is To Be Right Wing in 9 points, because I think that's Dave's best video that he's ever made. which I'm sure he may have a different view, but to me, that's his best video in my perspective. He just lays out these points about what makes the right, talking about this teleological grounding and wanting to leave something behind better than there was before, which I think is better to just sort of make the case for what you are and what you believe in, and that would be the way to go. So I would maybe start with that video, but I mean the What's Wrong with Nerd Culture series is very good. His Magical Words series is very good. So yeah, I mean there's quite a few there to do so. But yeah, I mean go through all of those. I think Dave has probably the most open-minded, progressive, friendly content in this sphere. He's got great content. He's been doing this stuff for years. And even my channel title is partially inspired by him. Don't tell him I said that, but it's true. Jarl says, hello from Sweden. It's 3 a.m. Well, I hope that you have a night shift or something, but hello, Jarl, and welcome to the stream at 3 a.m. But let's go on to another question that Monos had sent, because that was the first one about reading. And he's asking, what did I recently finish reading? I've recently finished actually a couple of rereads, so nothing new. I've recently finished rereading Frank S. Meyer's what is it? The Defense of Freedom and Other Related Essays, and then I finished rereading old Milton Friedman's Capitalism and Freedom, just some old classics. So because it came up in conversation a few months back and I wanted to reread that, so while I was sick I just went through old stuff during while I was just laying there not really doing anything for a couple of days. Let's see here. What do I plan to read in the future? Well, what I plan to read and actually seriously sit down and take notes on is Carlsbad's translations of Ludwig von Haller's work, because he's been doing the necessary efforts in translating it and making it available to those of us who don't actually read it in the original text. So it's now available in English. So that's what I'll be reviewing in the future, or at least reading, because there are people that say, he's a lot better than, say, de Maistre or others of the time that were counter-revolutionary thinkers. So that's something that to consider. Then he asks, whom should we all be reading but don't? Well, that's a very good question. Who should you all be reading that you probably haven't? Well, I would tell you to read the Philokalia, but I know not all of you are very Christian, but you should still read it anyway for what you can take away from its teachings. But as for who you should be reading, I think would be George F. Kennan, any of his works. He was an American diplomat. He was a historian, and he was, the guy that came up with containment. And he was also very against the aspect of trying to pursue containment at the end of the Cold War, right before he died. But anything by George Kennan is worth reading and worth taking a look at, whether it's history stuff or his geopolitical understanding, because he was in the thick of it as an American diplomat. So that would be something I'd recommend. So we're going to go through these questions now and finish up, hopefully with quite the few that he had gone through. Let's see here. Which author is surprisingly based once you actually read him? Well, I've been reading a lot of based texts, so I really don't know I could answer that fully. I would probably love to go back and read some of the fiction I liked enjoying as a kid. I think that there's some out there, even like, I guess you could call it like schlock, pulp fiction that I kind of enjoy. I really do like the Orphanage series, which is like basically sort of a realistic Miltech thing in the first two books. That's Starship Troopers, the movie, and then but it's based realistically on American technology and the current geopolitical situation militarily. And then it kind of jumps ship third or fourth books, but those are very good. I would recommend those. And then let's see. Am I on board with any nutrition movements in this corner of the internet? Probably the seed oils thing, like everybody else. I think that there's a lot to be doing there. What is my most cringe or degenerate take? Ooh. Most cringe or degenerate take? Oh, Probably that as much as I rail against it, I'm equally guilty of the let people enjoy things, because too often do I see Twitter accounts or personalities rail against things, and it's done in the basis of either some kind of traditionalism or to be based or to be you know uh, to be, I think that people should enjoy things. I don't think people need to be ranting for like 45 threads on Twitter or to make these long response videos about why looking at a marble statue that has nudity on it to be considered lustful. If you're looking at a marble statue painting that has someone's breasts exposed or someone's nude and you're having a lust problem, then I think that's more on you and your own problems than anything else. So in that instance, I guess my degenerate take is probably to let people enjoy things. Not to say that there aren't problems with it, or like video games and such. I do find some escapism there. I enjoy playing a variety of old games. I'm a sucker for playing System Shock. I love playing War Thunder. So, I mean, these all have their problems. We all have our vices, but having some basic self-discipline is something that I don't think too many people have these days, and that's also a problem. Trado asks, what do you think about the Confederate flag? And if not, if it's racist, or not if it's like in use today? Well, that's the question. Everyone goes after the stars and bars, but it's not like anyone knows the actual Confederate flag, which I always find interesting. I have no issue with it. I have family that fought for the Confederacy long down the line. I know plenty of Confederate monuments that live anywhere down the road, and there are plenty of historical markers as well. So it's not like I view it with any negative connotation. And the simple fact of the matter is, and myself will tell you this, Paul Fahrenheit will tell you this, Turnip will tell you this, is that what you can tell from coastal progressives, especially in the Northeast, is that it's basically they wish that Reconstruction never ended, and they would love to continue to do so, and they want to run against you. A flag can't be racist. These people prescribe meaning to it. My position is that the Confederate flag is a part of American history. You can't run from it. You can't hide from it. And you certainly shouldn't be applying modern day moral principles to something that happened over 150 years ago, which is why I really can't stand presentism. This is why I hate the musical Hamilton, even though I liked it when it first came out. Because if anyone who's read like 5 minutes of any actual biography that isn't just Chernov's biography of Hamilton, you'll realize that he's got his own problems and whatnot. But it's just like, oh, we're going to put on this like all non-white cast except for King George because, power, dynamics, while at the same time talking about how immigrants get things done. But lo and behold, Alexander Hamilton would write letters in the Gazette to sort of defend his racial purity and say that he wasn't mixed race. So those are hate facts, some historically accurate hate facts. And June is letting me know that Netflix is going to come out with a BioShock movie. That's going to be interesting. The only content on BioShock that I will recommend is all of the fantastic work that American Krogan has done. So go watch that series on BioShock and don't be spending your money on Netflix. Let's see. Prude, if you enjoy System Shock, have you played Prey 2017? It's very good. I have not played it yet. My brother actually recommended it to me. I have it sitting in my Steam library. I have not opened it. But I really don't have a lot of time outside for maybe the occasional 30 minutes or an hour or so to get a few games in with what I do play. But I should probably dedicate to it. But I also should probably just do an OBS stream setup so I can. Record Deepness, the Prudentialist. Do you think that Robert Filmer is worth reading today, especially Patriarcha? Yes. I read Patriarcha in college, and then I read it maybe in 2019, for a second time, because I had a digital copy on this laptop that I'm actually using to stream. But I recently bought Imperium Press's physical hard copy, the complete edition of what it is. So I would tell you yes, wholeheartedly. Defending the divine right of kings and taking a systematic takedown of how, parliamentary democracy or the parliamentary system at the time does not work, and it obfuscates, aspects of power and why a monarchy is more efficient and effective. Yeah, by all means, Record Deepness, do read Robert Filmer's Patriarcha. Just go read it. That's all I can say. Go read it. Glow in the Dark says some presentism is fine and is going to happen. Well, of course it's going to happen. Hector from the Iliad was depicted in full plate in medieval times, but our current present is just so garbage. So, Well, that's the issue, right? Is that at least back then there would be appreciation for the history and what was being told. This is why you will never ever hear me talk about the, what was it, 2016, 2017 reboot of Ben-Hur, because I know that it's not good, and I don't have to watch it to tell you it's bad. I don't have to watch it to tell you that it's not worth watching, because it's not going to be respectful to the Charlton Heston or the silent film that was made or the book itself, which I have ordered and I picked it up. I have not actually taken the time to read it, so that should be on my future list of reads to do, is the actual Ben-Hur by General Lew Wallace. That'll be on that list. But yeah, I mean, our current president just sucks. So you're not going to get respect for history. You're not going to get respect for things. And I mean, they're already trotting all over your favorite fiction, right? We're already seeing this with Amazon, which apparently they only have very limited rights to talk about with that franchise or that intellectual property. So you already know it's going to be garbage. So yeah, it's a shame. But yeah, I mean, the nice thing is, and this is why, if there's one point that Razor Fist has ever made a very good point on, is that you need to have actual physical media. Have your physical media before it's digitally altered. Have your physical media before they take certain episodes off your favorite streaming service. Have physical copies of everything. If that means you have to burn CDs, preserve a VCR player, do it. So that's all I can say. Symbol says, didn't they try to make everyone gay in the Ben-Hur remake, like everything else? Well, in fact, apparently Gore Vidal tried to make Judah Ben-Hur and Marsalis gay in the original one, and Charlton Heston shut him down. But I mean, Gore Vidal is also a disgusting human being, so I won't even get into that. But yeah, although his Burr novel is actually very good. I read, I think it's a series. I've read the first one. I have a copy of it somewhere. Most of my books are still in storage, but yeah. But no, there's just a lot that I want to do, and the full timeness of things makes it very difficult. But yes, Fingal, Gore Vidal had an influence in the making of Ben-Hur. I believe he has a writing credit, if I recall correctly. But yeah, he definitely had an influence there, to which he was not liked. But I mean, if you want a good idea of what Gore Vidal was like, go watch the debates during the 1968 Democratic and Republican conventions between him and William F. Buckley Jr. There's actually a really good documentary on it. It used to be on Netflix. I don't know where it is now, but it was very, very, very good. Even though I don't like Gore Vidal for all sorts of valid reasons, the man was talented in his prose. I will say that much. And yeah, I would have loved to have seen what that conversation between Heston and Gore Vidal would have been like, but alas, things that are lost to history. Although you will always enjoy the recording of William F. Buckley Jr. saying, "Call me a crypto Nazi one more time, and I'll just like bop you in the mouth." But yeah, it's a series of debates, and that, unfortunately, those debates are what makes modern political discourse such garbage, because before that, everything used to be covered gavel to gavel, resolution to resolution, and now everything is just having pundits screaming at each other, and which is how you get like Fox News had bringing on libs to go debate them and looking bad at them. And the same thing now on like The View or MSNBC, CNN's the same way. I mean, it's in virtually all forms of legacy media, right? So it's not to say that those debates did not have a consequences, because they certainly do even to this day. And I mean, it still exists now, right, in the realm of internet blood sports. And I mean, that was basically the entire 2015, 2016, 2017 era of YouTube. It was the whole basis of just debating one another and just shit flinging. It was just horrible. No, Adam, this is not the first time. This is just the first time on the channel. I've done it on BTR twice now, and I've done it as well with Radlib on the episode I was on with him, and I've done it twice now on Lambda Bible Studies, because Lambda was the gentleman who inspired me to do it. Because if he has the courage to go on as a Christian and to talk about what he believes in and to hold his positions and to hold his views, then I think it's proper and right that I do the same. So, first time on the channel, but not the first time. I reserved that moment on Lambda's channel just based on inspiration, out of respect to him. But we are nearing up on an hour and a half. In about half an hour, I'm going to have to go take medication for anti-rejection meds. So we'll probably go on for another 5-10 minutes and then wrap everything up because I still have to pack. I leave tomorrow evening with Oros, and I will actually be Oros Post, and I will be carpooling together and making the drive down there. So it'll be a good time. It'll be a road trip, and we'll probably talk about it and all that jazz. But yeah, lots of good stuff. Jacob says that blood sports helped me turn away from the skeptics. TM. Well, that and especially the Kraut and T's self-destructive meltdown. Are there any academics in the room? Yeah. That was actually that was a sphere of YouTube I did not watch. I was involved a lot in sort of the normie politics things and things like that. So things like that I definitely didn't watch. And so I'm listening to like Geo talk about like Ralph's meltdown and Mr. Medicare calling him out. And I'm just like, I never watched any of that. So it was like from a time that I just never knew. Ryan Young asking me, what cyborg organ did I acquire? Well, I got a kidney, and I talked about it a while back after I got home from the hospital, and I recorded a video about it. But yeah, that's what I got. And I'm going to just move on from there, because if not, I'm going to get really emotional and not talk about it, because I recently heard back from the donor family. So I have a name to the donor who was deceased. And now I have his name that I can pray for the repose of his soul every night, and that's what I do. And the good father was kind enough to add his name to the prayers that we have in the liturgy, which is always nice. But I'm gonna leave it at there before I start, because you can see this, but I'm not gonna let you see the emotion. Oh no, you're fine, man. You're good. It's just, I'm quite usually very straightforward with it, but it's just once you get a name and you can look things up and start seeing it, you kind of look back and you're like, oh, I probably shouldn't have been so morbidly joking, because while I was on dialysis and I had signed up because of how thin and how tall I am, I'm a very skinny lad. As those of you at the event will find out, I'm very thin, and I qualified for a pediatric one, and that's what I got, which, is always, I remember joking about it before all of this had happened. And I said, oh, maybe one of these days, some like 8-year-old is going to ride their bike without a helmet on for the last time. And I was just like, oh, I look back now and I just really wish I didn't make those jokes. You get really humbled very quickly by your brushes with death and things like that. But yeah, let's see. What's everyone else talking about now? I think we're talking about skeptics now. Ryan Young, you're right. You got to laugh or you cry. Well, you laugh now and then you get the information and then you cry later. So that's for sure. Gang asks an interesting question. And this is sort of a good thing to talk about. Is there anyone across the aisle that you would wish to debate? Well, here's the thing, is that I have a huge problem with how internet blood sports works, because whether it's modern day debate tries to do a decent job moderating it. And I think in Jay Dyer, when he has guests on, brings they're timed or they're structured, which I greatly appreciate. But most internet blood sports is just like flinging crap at one another, and you're talking over each other because you're citing books and you're citing literature that not the other person has read, which can become like, people end up looking like total suits, right? Because you'll get that land shark moment where he's talking to Logo Daedalus, and Logo's like, well, of course I've read Avola's books on theosophy, and Avola never wrote such a book, right? And that's how you get to look like a fraud. So like the current structure of like debating, it doesn't work for me. The one debate I've ever done was actually on Apostolic Majesty's channel, and I took the contrarian position, at least to his audience and to probably a good chunk of everyone in here, is the about the American Revolution. Was it good or not, or something like that? And I told AM, I was just like, well, let's structure it. So I gave him like old policy debate, structures, and we went with that, which I thought was a very good time. I would like to have conversations with people that I probably would disagree with, I would love to probably, or at least not have very strong right wing takes. I think that there are people that talk about these sort of things. I loved being on like the Good Old Boys podcast. I think they say very interesting stuff. It's not that they're like right, left, center, or anything. I just find what they all say very interesting. And I've talked to others like, oh goodness, what's his name? Labor. Oh Lord, I'm gonna feel so bad because I know that he follows my channel and he's gonna see this and he's gonna yell at me. Unskilled laborer, that's his name. Yeah, I would like to talk to people like that more, with sort of like the crypto centrist types. But I also feel like Dave's position on that is also like he does that very well, and I think that he's probably better at articulating it. But he's also more established than I am, you know. But no, it's a good question. Let's see. Did I participate, since we're talking about geopolitics and stuff? Did you ever participate in Model UN in high school? It was my first real taste of it. Funny though, because I grew to despise the UN after my first trip to an international. I did it freshman year of college, or freshman year of high school, and then I did speech and debate throughout the rest of my high school and college career to some national degree of success. But that's how I fell in love with it, because, you know, you get those extemporaneous speaking questions that are all usually about foreign policy, and I could give an answer in 30 minutes because that's how you do it, right? You research for 30 minutes, you give your 7-minute speech, and you're like, all right, let's go, because I can give you the answers. Because, you know, I've got the giga brain that'll tell you how to fix it. So yeah, foreign policy became my specialty, and that's what I studied. I studied comparative, like, international systems, foreign affairs, foreign relations, and that became my, like, weirdly my niche specialty, which is why I can talk out of my ass for like on and on and on and on without too many filler words. Although I do have a terrible filler phrase on the Sunday stream with all that being said, you know. But yeah, so I definitely did plenty of public speaking events. Creative expression dominator. Creative expression is not a category I'm familiar with. I did a lot of the LP events. Impromptu was probably the best thing that I was good at. I didn't do a lot of the performative stuff like poetry, prose, or duo or anything like that. I would only do poetry, or I would only do prose if it meant that there was like a speaker award on the table where you did all 3 categories of limited prep, you know, prepared speeches, like informative, communication analysis, and then you had to do the performative stuff. It's the only time I would ever do it. But yeah, the limited prep stuff was my strongest. I loved impromptu because nothing puts the brain at full blast like flipping a sheet of paper over, reading 2 quotations, picking one, and trying to develop a 5.5-minute speech in 90 seconds. Because there's a thrill for sure. But yeah. Why do IR grads come out so paused in general? It doesn't seem to dominate theory like your Sunday lectures. Well, because there's always usually a lot of hefty doses of like public administration, or a lot of them. I mean, you go into it, right? Because, like, for instance, my original plan was to go into law, which I didn't do. But I mean, a lot of them are just striver types. A lot of them want to be a part of the system, so they go to like grad school or go to a PhD or go work at a think tank. And I mean, you have to obey the rules of the Washington Consensus because that's where all of the you know, power and money and grants are. So you go where the incentives take you, and the incentives tell you to be paused, and that's kind of how it works. Which is why I kind of think you want to pursue, like someone had suggested earlier in stream, perhaps your own alternative sort of stuff here. But yeah, no, there's a lot of things that I still want to work on in the future and things like that. Cam and Miles says, I did that once. I got some prompt about Godzilla. It's also a really great way to test if you're funny or not, because you have to come up with like these really fun attention-getting devices and introductions. And if you can be humorous, that helps you a lot. Which is always fun. I try to be quick with a joke, but it turns out I'm more of one of those referential people. So I guess it all just depends. But no, I wish I had fun topics. I think the most fun prompt or topic I ever got was just this whole, like, you're king of the world, what do you do? And it was just like, yes, the ego power trip where everyone has to listen to me for 7 minutes, just intellectually be masturbatory, you know, things like that. So But the theory stuff is interesting because, like I've been recently talking to others, there's not one singular cohesive theory or narrative that can tell you everything. You kind of have to know them all in order to have a pretty accurate understanding of sorts to talk about it. So things to keep in mind. But as we wrap up here, just to give some announcements of sorts, the Analog Horror Real Talk will premiere on Saturday. And then afterwards, we will probably have, we'll go back into Sunday stream stuff. I'm now going to have to start doing some research on that Morocco-Algeria situation, because I do think that will be something to definitely keep in mind, because I'm not too informed. And then it'll be post-Olympics, I think. So we can also look at that and start seeing what the moves are. But I also want to start taking a dive, because I have some followers on Twitter that are from India that I want to have a conversation with, because I think Indian domestic politics plays a huge role, of course, internationally with their positions. So I think that'll be fun to talk about. And then I want to start interviewing people. I'd love to interview Jim Jatras, for example. Worked as a Senate advisor. He's an Orthodox Christian. He knows his Russia stuff very well. So like I mentioned earlier, I do want to poke my or dip my toes and start asking sort of the more face feeling and stuff like that. Those who've actually done the work. Ryan Young for $5 US. Thank you so much. My small donation to incentivize you away from the DC consensus. Well, you guys keep it all going, so that'll definitely happen for sure. But yeah, no, thank you so much. Most influential book I've ever read. There's definitely been a few that have shaped my worldview. I read the Screw Tape Letters when I was in high school. That was a real big influence on me, talking about how like evil works in this fictional sense. And then I guess for international relations, I've mentioned a lot that the works of John J. Mearsheimer, The Tragedy of Great Power Politics, is definitely the biggest influence on me, besides what got me into geopolitics in the first place, which was the 2009 George Friedman book, The Next 100 Years. That definitely was one of the most influential ones on me, because I was about getting ready to go into high school when I first read that book, and lo and behold, all these years later, I'm still talking about how the world works in international relations, and you all tune in on Sundays for it. So those would be some of the most influential texts that I've read. But we've got a few more minutes, and then I'm going to clock out, so to speak, and so I can pack and get everything set and ready to go, because tomorrow evening thus becomes the drive. But yeah, I mean, this has been fun. I might do this more often with you all. It's always nice to just have conversations and such, rather than prepping a lecture and just riffing back and forth with a lot of you. It's always more entertaining. Cam and Miles says, the feeling of walking into a room and everyone's saying, fuck, him again, and knowing that you're taking the one. Oh, there are so many times where I never felt that feeling, because I went to a much smaller institution. I would always walk into a room feeling like the perpetual underdog, because I'm just like, oh, here are all these colleges with like $1 million+ budgets for these programs, because they get to travel and do everything, and they have their clothing set to a specific like cut and standard that they have to do. So I've only had very few occasions of that feeling. I've always felt like I'm the underdog, like I had to punch above my weight, even though people would tell me that I'm just as skilled. So, but no, it's a very, very good feeling, knowing that you can walk into a room, look at your competition, and know that you're doing just fine. Or finishing a speech that was like, like a limited prep extemporaneous speech, and then finishing up and you're like, yeah, there's no, like, especially when you speak first or something, or like very early on, and you just know that you gave the best presentation in there. That's definitely one of the better feelings that's out there. I definitely agree with you. But when we get back, there will be some more research briefing style lectures. I'm going to start reaching out and trying to get interviews. And then that, I think, we'll just have more scripted stuff in the works. Like I said, I've been working on a video about people on the transplant waitlist being denied because of their vaccination status. So those are definitely going to be things that I talk about as well. Cameron, I don't know. I can ask him. I think he did MUN or something, but I'll just poke his brain when I see him on Friday, so who knows. But yeah. But until then, ladies and gentlemen, I will see you all. There we go. last minute super chat from Yoconda Plus. Would you be interested in coming onto a podcast I do with a friend? We choose two films that are similar or contrast in some way and discuss them. Sure, I would love to talk movies. Go ahead and send me a DM on Twitter and we can figure it out. And thank you so much for the $10 Australian. I sincerely hope that things are doing well. I recently read that the governments are planning on changing their COVID restrictions, but hopefully the penal colony gets a little better down there. But thank you so much. Just send me a DM on Twitter and we can definitely figure out some details and schedule it out. But hopefully there's no more last minute super chats, although I certainly won't be opposed. Just there'll be plenty of work to do in the future. I still have plenty of things lined up for you all, things to enjoy, things to do. And it'll be a good time. And I'll let you know how the event goes. I'll probably do some kind of little after action report video or stream so you guys can know. But yeah, no, this has been fantastic. And I wouldn't be able to do this without all of you all watching, liking, sharing, and commenting on that stuff. That stuff still matters despite the YouTube throttling of people on the right. It does mean a lot. And again, with like a little bit over a year and 5,000 subs, good Lord. I was planning to do this just ranting into the void and not expecting an audience, but you guys make it awesome and you guys make it worth it. So take care, everybody. I hope that you all have enjoyed this little conversation. And most importantly, be prudent. And I'll see you all next time.